The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your heavenly Father. For he makes his sun rise on the bad and the good, and causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what recompense will you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers and sisters only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? So be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect." The Gospel of the Lord.
Okay, so we're closer to where we left off yesterday. We're in chapter 5 of Matthew's Gospel. So we're at the beginning stages of the Sermon on the Mount. And what we see Jesus doing here is certainly worth noting, and not simply because it's right before us today, but Jesus is again rewriting the people's expectations of what it is they are to be about as God's people. As you have some sense in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus is calling Israel to be Israel at last. And I think part of the challenge for Israel as a people is to hold together something of a paradox. They are God's chosen people, and yet they're not special. They're God's chosen people. They're not special. I mean, in this sense, right? Well, I don't think we have. Yeah, we do. For he makes his sun rise on the bad and the good and causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Where's the distinction? Right? There is just and unjust. There is bad and good. But rain is falling on them the same. The sun is shining on them the same. They're God's chosen people, but they're not special. They're special vocationally. They're special like that God has called them to serve a particular purpose. And that purpose is to be a light to the nations. It's to bring God's blessing to the world. And so then what Jesus is looking at here is, say, like the inherited concept of justice. And just before this, he says, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Yeah? But I say, turn the other cheek, go the extra mile, and so on and so forth. And here, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, there's justice there. It's like given the world's state of affairs, given the kind of settled state of affairs that we encounter in the world, yeah, this is the way it is. I mean, this keeps people in somewhat ordered groups and, clans or whatever it may be. To say, yeah, okay, just love your own. And this is what we see again, right? This is like our kind of settled, can I say, darkened sense of justice, right? Because you love those who love you. There's a particular kind of settled justice in that. What do I mean? What do I mean by that? Justice in terms of like more broadly the right relationship between people and the right relationship between peoples. And the reality is, I can say the sad reality is that even as Christians, this is also tends to be our state of affairs as well. That's totally embarrassing, actually. It's 2,000 years on, and I don't know what progress we've made here, right? Because we have in our minds, we love those who love us. We greet our brothers and sisters only, right? So in a sense, do we love our enemies? Yeah, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. This is what you've heard. But I say to you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Now again, this is the vocation we have inherited, because when Jesus is calling Israel to be Israel at last, what he's doing is he is being Israel in their midst. And he is calling people to himself. He is calling a people to himself to be Israel at last, in the power of his own life. Right, so he's giving us then the strength to do what he is exhorting us to do as his people. That's the vocation. That's the vocation that you have said yes to. Were you blind to it when you said yes? Did you know that Jesus was going to call you to hate your enemies when you said yes to him? You should have, probably, because it's in the scriptures. I mean, this happened 2,000 years ago. It's not like this should really take us by surprise. But you might not have heard it as forcefully as this. Right? But it's real, it's true. And you know what? Good. I mean, this is a blessing. If that's the reality, like if we say, if Jesus will have come to us in the point where we are committed to him or growing in our commitment to him, and he said, you know what? Love your enemies, love your enemies, love your enemies. And you would have said, I just can't take this. I just can't do it. Right? So maybe to this point, God has allowed us to be blind to the demands of discipleship, so that today we could take them on. So that today we could do it. Because today you can hear it. And of course I'm speaking to the people who can hear what I'm saying. Right? You can hear it today. You can hear what the demands of discipleship are today. And they are to love your enemy. Love your enemies. Why? This is your vocation. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. The gravest act of injustice the world has ever seen, and the man suffering it begs God for forgiveness of those who are exacting that punishment on him. And his life is in us. Are we holding it at bay? Holding it down, crushing it, right? No, I can't. No, we can, because he did. Right? He went all the way so that we could have access to that life that would enable us to love our enemies. That's the call. And that's what it means to be a light to the nations. Yeah, so Jesus is talking about justice here, but he's talking about a restorative justice. Not restorative justice the way you're going to find it on Wikipedia. A restorative justice in the sense of an enlivening justice. This is what it means. This is the high pitch of justice. When we love God with our whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, then we love our enemies. And that's what justice is. And if we love our enemies, then the world is going to be changed. Right? If we start at that level, if we keep going there, then the world will have to respond. The world will have to come along or receive its judgment from God. But that's not our task. Our task is simply to look to him, whose life is now our lifeblood. We look to him who gives himself to us as food and drink, praying that we don't eat and drink in vain, but that we give our yes now to his yes to God, that we might likewise be a light to the nations, that we might likewise bring God's blessing to everyone we encounter. That's the call. That's our task. That's what he's equipping us to do here and now.